Hey, Kristen.
Oh, and I'm going to take my earpieces out because they're not working.
Oh,
Because the show must go on, right? Um, Hello, everyone. Let me see who's here just so I can see who's chiming in. All right, sorry, a little crazy start to everything today. My name is Kristen Snowden. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And most of my webinars, I like to say, kind of cover relationship struggles at large. So just everything from communication to the places and the times and the issues that come up often um, that cause us pain and angst and struggle and conflict within our relationship dynamics. And I know you've all seen me talk about shame and vulnerability and intimacy often. There was a particular topic of shame that I was just recently talking about, and I thought that lecture went really well, and I realized I never really talked about that in this webinar setting. So today I'm going to talk about, it's a Brene Brown subject called shame shields. And it gives you a really great context and understanding of how, when we are engaging with loved ones or coworkers or friends or other people in life, when we pick up that feeling of shame, of being shamed, or someone is kind of poking at us and really hitting our self-esteem and our self-worth and our value, that we kind of quickly throw up these shame shields to kind of manage the discomfort of that exchange. And that's when we can be very reactionary and kind of the things come out of our mouth that we didn't really mean to say them. You can call them like defense mechanisms too. So let me give some really background general context. You can always go back and look at my former videos on shame and vulnerability and intimacy, but it's basically this idea that we are neurobiologically wired to want to connect with other people. So much of our wiring basically gives us lots of feel-good hormones and chemicals that say, yes, go out, touch, connect, have deep talks, have sex, reproduce, have friendships, have commonalities and passions with other people. This says, yes, this feels good, keep doing it. But conversely, anytime we find ourselves failing, falling short, when we're in an argument with someone, when we're in disconnection with other people, when we're seeing sad things on the news or on our news streams, which is constantly now, we experience this feeling of disconnection. Of, I fell short and I didn't get that promotion, or I failed at this, or I'm in an argument and a disagreement with someone and she or he is mad at me and she or he did this thing that's really disappointing and angry and upsetting to me. Or literally when people disconnect, leave us, leave the relationship, or leave this earth and pass away. So feel-good hormones coming out when we're in connection. Really negative, uncomfortable feelings come out when we're in disconnection. And so basically shame is all about that. So as long as we have a strong drive to want to connect with other people, we're always conversely going to have this deep fear of what if we're not valuable or good enough for that. And that is shame. So much of the motivations of what lead us to do something or what cause us to pull away from something have an underlying shame issue that you can always explore. And I kind of joke that once you understand how shame shows up in your life, you suddenly feel completely empowered in almost any situation, even as uncomfortable as some of these situations may be with loved ones and friends, to fully understand the shame context of like, oh, he said this and that, like the story I told myself was this. And that is why I am so deeply in pain from what just happened. Some of it's based, I mean, some of these shame voices is based on your trauma, right? And that's a whole other set of webinars, what trauma and childhood issues and attachment issues lead you to have these particular shame voices. And some of it is because they literally have said something, literally said, you're a bad mom. Why are you so selfish and not giving enough to your mom or to your children? And that will lead me, obviously, to be in a big shame spiral of, oh my gosh, I don't want to be perceived as a bad mom. So a really quick thing, and I think I am a certified Daring Way facilitator, so meaning I took all the courses and training, and I'm fully Brene Brown certified in all her things, shame, vulnerability, and intimacy, and shame resiliency. And most of her stuff is licensed, but I actually have a lot of forms that some of the forms I gave to Tammy, and I believe we're going to be able to post online, so you can access these down in my comments. Hopefully when I post this, I'll be able to add this to my website and comments, so you can get these really, really great forms. But one of them is kind of what she calls her shame resiliency model. And then what I love is she gets deep down into the physiology of what shame is, because the idea is if you can feel it coming up in your body. Some people, when they're in shame, so when they're in an uncomfortable argument with someone and they say something that's really cutthroat, or they read something in an email or see something that really makes them feel shame, they will feel maybe their face heat up, or kind of feel like heat coming out of their body, or feel really nauseous and sick. And it's understanding that if you can first identify how it shows up physiologically, viscerally in your body, then that can be your cue to kind of stop and say, okay, what just happened there? You know, what was said, what was done? And a really great kind of soundbite. So many people find shame to be so intangible. You know, I'll sit and I'll kind of lecture and talk with clients about shame over and over and over again, and they'll kind of nod through it. And then like 6 months into session, they'll go, you know what? I think I have shame. Have you ever heard of that? I think I have a problem with this whole shame thing. And I have that happen all the time. And in fact, that's been my story about shame. You know, I could conceptually talk about it. I could read books and understand them. I could teach it and point it out to other people. But it was so intangible to me. It was so insidious to me. And it took months and months and months of digging before I could really figure out how it kind of physiologically showed up in my body, what my most common shame voices were, which I think another webinar I did was on shame triggers. And I provided a really great worksheet to kind of dig through your stuff and figure out where your big hot spots are of shame, because your shame issues are going to be different than my shame issues. It's just different depending on how we were raised, what we witnessed growing up, what things were said and done to us, our trauma, our environments, our value systems. Those all inform what the greatest shame issues are for us. So I can't sit here and tell you what your shame is. I can just describe it, help you identify it physiologically, and then give you kind of a platform to understand, or a construct to help you understand it. And so that's what we're going to do a little bit today. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to try to post these, and these are really great things to figure out on your own. But a really great way to understand shame is I'm going to be in shame when someone has said or done something where I have realized that I've worked so hard to never be perceived this way, and I feel like they're calling me out and telling me that I am exactly that. Okay, so let's say my particular issue is that I don't want to be, I got made fun of a lot growing up for being like a rule follower. My maiden name's Minto. They used to call me Mom Minto because I was kind of like a goody two-shoes, boss of everybody. And kind of joked that I was never willing to do those high risk taking behaviors. But it wasn't like, oh, you're a good child that follows the rules. It was like, the story I heard is, who wants to be with that? Who wants to hang out with that? Because we want to go do fun things and you're a fun killer, right? So meaning that, because that's the story I tell myself, that, and I feel deep shame around that, because remember, we want to be connected to other people. We want to feel like we are valuable and desired, to like be loved and connect and hang out with. So I have sensitivity around any topic in that area where I could possibly be perceived as a boring, rule following, you know, boss of everyone, know it all. I could come up with different adjectives. They don't even need to say it, because all I have to do is just simply think that I'm being perceived that way. So do you guys get that? That is what shame is it's like, it's these things that are deeply hurtful to you, and they have said stuff or things are happening around you where you are like, uh-oh, they're on to me. This thing I've worked so hard to never be perceived as, they're on to me now, and they know that I suck. Okay, so that's shame. And so when I'm in that place, one of three things, well, Brene Brown will say that, look, in the face of shame, when you're engaging with other people, you can generally do one of three things. You can either kind of puff up your chest and pretend to be bigger than you are and better than you are, and smarter, and you know it all and all that kind of stuff. Or you can kind of shrink back and just like, if I never engage, if I never kind of show up, if I never say anything, if I never disagree, then I can't be disliked or disconnected from. Or you can find a happy medium between those two things, and basically what she calls a stand your sacred ground. So I don't puff up and pretend to be bigger than I am. I don't shrink back and forego speaking my mind or my opinion or say what I'm thinking or feeling. I find some happy medium in between there. And if you've seen any of my other webinars, I talk about tools and models for how to do that. You know, she uses the acronym BRAVING, where it's like boundaries and empathy and compassion and generosity for other people, and giving and having integrity, saying what you mean what you say, keeping your side of the street clean, and expecting others to do the same thing. Like, those are all tools with which to show up and be seen without, because if you obviously show up for real, when people look at you or see what you say or see what you do and go, ugh, no, not interested, then it's even more painful, because it's like, I wasn't even putting up a facade. So I can't even walk away from this saying, well, they just didn't like the BS version of me. They actually saw vulnerable parts of me and were like, no, thanks. And obviously that's why people like your family and your partner, a lot of people here who are chiming in right now, listening in, are in deep pain, often because there's so much shame around hurt and pain that's been exchanged in the partnership of a primary relationship. So marriage, but even also kids, family members, etc. So that can cut you so deep because they know you more and they see you more. So being rejected by them, being hurt by them, can just cut even deeper. So these things show up. So can you split screen, Tammy? Is that?
I can share my screen, and I've got that. So hang on, I'm going to share my screen.
So we're going to can you put up the shame shield so just they can see this a little bit better?
Can you see that?
Yeah. So that's the shame resiliency model. Was there the other one?
Did I not? Okay, then I'm going to stop sharing and go find the other one. I thought.
Okay, sorry. I could go while you're looking for that.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and it should say shame shields on it, I think.
I did. I just saved one to my computer. So
yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, it was in two different emails. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's three different ways. So basically, it's really three great ways to understand that when I'm being confronted with these shame voices, when there's this possibility that it's like, oh no, they're on to me. They perceived me as, oops, I'm losing my light, as a bad employee or a bad mom or all these other things. That's when I'm going to be in the greatest state of shame. I'm going to respond in one of three ways. So one of the ways is moving away. So I'm not sure if you'll see this, but it's moving away. It's moving away, moving toward, or moving against. And it's basically saying that when I'm going to, and it's really interesting because depending on what the insult was, or depending on the argument or who you're arguing with, you're going to respond differently. So moving away is when I withdraw, hide, silence myself, maybe keep other people's secrets. And that is, so it's saying that my shield is that when you're looking at me, when I feel like I'm being shamed or that I'm less than or unvaluable, I'm going to pull away. I'm going to move away from you. So I'm not going to engage in the argument. I'm not going to engage in the discussion. I'm not going to show up and be seen and kind of share what I'm thinking and feeling. There it is. I'm going to just kind of, I don't know, literally withdraw, literally hide, literally shut down. That's what happens is in the face of adversity and the possibility that I'm, that someone might not like me, I'm going to shut down. The next one is moving toward. So that is the people pleasing response. So in the state of adversity, in the state of where I think someone's upset at me, I'm being called out on something, I don't speak up for myself. I don't share what I'm really thinking. I just seek to please and appease. So there might be a partnership where you just say, yes, I'm sorry, I apologize, you're right, I'm wrong, I'll do better. Versus kind of saying, well, I'm upset because you said that you were going to call and you didn't, and I got 6 hours of radio silence. And so, yeah, that's why I was upset when you came home from work, is because I feel like when you don't return my text messages or my phone calls, the story I tell myself is that I don't take up space in your mind and your heart, and that you think that we've easily moved on from this recent relationship crisis, and you don't realize that I'm still struggling and I'm still trying to heal, but I can't heal when you don't return my phone calls and my text messages, and I'm left wondering what's going on in that time. And it's scary, and it makes me mad, and it makes me angry at myself that my world is surrounded by whether or not you respond to my calls or not, right? That's kind of showing up and being seen and real. It's obviously what that is missing is the next one, which is moving against, where it's I just try to gain power over the situation by bulldozing, by if I feel shame slime by you, I'm going to shame you back real hardcore. So I'll be aggressive. So that would be if I didn't get the phone call back and I'm struggling, instead of showing up the way I gave an example earlier, it would be like, who do you think you are? Like, I'm sitting here making our dinner, taking care of our kids. And like, do you think that my whole world should be built around whether or not you're going to tell me when you're coming home and returning my calls and my important questions? Like, why do you think that you're so important that you can go off and just answer phone calls and texts whenever you freaking feel like it, right? That's not me showing up and saying how vulnerable I am and how much I'm struggling with your behavior and your choices. There's so much of like re-shaming someone. So I feel like I can be powerful in that moment instead of someone weak in that moment, right? That's trying to turn the table. We have a lot of, let's say, political leadership right now where that happens all the time. Anytime there's a question of, hey, how is this going? How should we handle this? It's like, don't question me. I know everything. I know the answer to everything. And you had to be really, really careful with that, is when you're being challenged or someone's questioning your competency or who you are and your integrity and all that, it's not a good sign when all you do is go back and just re-slime them. How's your integrity? Don't forget you've been a pretty crappy human being too. Don't think that you're perfect. So really check yourself on these 3 things. It's a really great exercise, and maybe even to do in your partnership, is to explore who do you move away from, who do you move toward, and who do you move against. So it's really interesting to see that moving, like if I looked at move against, whether I like to own it or not, I tend to move against people who I love the most, right? Because maybe in my head, they're the safest people. Maybe in my head, they're the ones who can hurt me the most. So I kind of feel more like the dog backed in the corner. So I kind of do more of the reactionary bite your hand off because you've wounded me so much. But I'm more prone that, like, the more vulnerable I am to you, the more I love you, the more I'm capable of moving against you. Moving toward the people pleasing, the appeasing, whatever you say, usually that's when there's a power, when I feel like there's a power differentiation. So maybe an employee, or I want to get something from that person, or I just don't want to, it's a friendship where I just don't want adversity and I don't want to go into that complication. I'll people please. And similarly, maybe in the moving away, that I've just assessed that they're just not someone who's capable of being able to do a vulnerable, intimate, authentic exchange with them. So I just won't answer their phone call. I won't have those difficult conversations. I won't have, I'll withdraw, I'll disconnect. But it's really interesting to figure out who, there's another questionnaire on those sets of forms that it's like, who are you most likely to move away from? What are the triggers and situations that cause you to move away? Who do you move toward? What triggers that? What kind of things do you say? And what environments? Because you'll find that it's depending on the person, the situation, and then of course your experience. So where you're at mentally, physically, like mental health wise, will cause you to do all things in different times. So I think Tammy and I have shared stories that during this pandemic quarantine, that sometimes she and I and our mental health states will just withdraw. So just won't even show up that day, just kind of be that turtle pulling into the shell and just move away, because the vulnerability and connection and intimacy of this world is just too much. So it's just move away. But then maybe we're already at a tense, hyped up, overwhelmed state. So in something that was really simple that we perceived as a shaming experience, we'll move against and kind of bite someone's head off. I should just speak for myself, right, Tammy? I will bite their head off, and I will attack, just because I'm not in the right headspace for things like that. So that those behaviors, the moving away, the moving toward, the moving against, can also be really great indicators of, where am I in my mental health space? If I, because if we're already mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, if we're already seeing overwhelming things on the news stream all the time, or already being really challenged, our neurobiology may only want to go to these defense mechanisms of moving away, moving toward, moving against, instead of, like I said, conjuring up the courage and the executive functioning of figuring out who we are, how we want to show up, what behaviors and words are in our integrity and are authentic. I mean, those things are exhausting, or can be exhausting, and take a lot of time and energy, because it's not our default state. Our default state are these shame shields, the moving away, moving toward, moving against. Those are places that oftentimes feel safer, easier, more powerful to us. So those will be our go-to behaviors. But the key is to, you can take that off the screen, Tammy. The key is to kind of realize that they happen, and always know you can go back and say, you asked me if I had an opinion, or you asked me, is there a particular thing you want to do about this? And I was like, no, whatever you want. Sure. Yeah, I don't care. But now I think about it and I feel resentment like building up in my body. And I realize I do have an opinion. Like, I realize I'm actually not okay with it. And the idea of me going with this idea that you want is making me really angry and like resentful. So can we talk about finding a happy medium between us? Or, as I often do, move against. So like the emotional vomit will come out and I'll say something crappy. And when it does, it's my responsibility to stop and say, that's not what I meant to say. I'm sorry. That's not okay the way I said it, the tone I took and all that. I'm just saying this situation's really frustrating because I feel like I told you 6 times and you didn't hear me, and it's not cool what I said to you, but let's talk about this because I don't think we're like communicating the right way right now. So things like that, these can really help with your Master Ninja skills. And that's it. Ready for questions.
Yeah, so we'd invite you to put any questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, any comments. And if anybody wants me to email those sheets to you, I can do that if that would be helpful. Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. I was thinking how interesting it is because, I tend to go, what kind of personality are you? So like I would think we're one shield or another, but
Mm-hmm.
like to think about, with different people or even at different times,
Mm-hmm.
depending on where I'm at, to float through those, which is of course more complicated because like I can't just go, well, here's what I am and therefore here's what I need to do.
Right.
So looking at those little nuances, but I do really think in this current time, I have, in the pulling back, I've been really intentional about limiting my amount of time with the news and all of that because it's so negative, and I just don't do well with being inundated with all negative stuff. So I have Animal Planet on a lot. I've been intentional. But I really do. It's like it's ridiculous, but it's healthier for me, and then I can go get the information I need, because I do need to, I can't completely unplug, but I've been intentional about, okay, now I'm going to go do this instead of it just being, washing over me all the time. But I was thinking too, the other day, I was like, I said something terribly unkind to my husband in a kind of a throwaway comment,
Mm-hmm.
and like it took a long time, like I bet it was at least an hour, and I came back to him and I said, that was really completely uncalled for me to say that, but I didn't even, like, it kind of niggled at me for the moment, but like there was something that I was just like, whatever, but it didn't really dawn on me, that it was completely unkind and uncalled for and everything. So I had to go back and make amends to him. But I just thought how, like, I was disconnected in that, in that moment, from that. I was thinking, oh gosh, I cannot believe this.
So
Yeah, it happens all the time. And I should put on do not disturb, and I keep forgetting to do that. So, but I was thinking too, how, you said something happens and, somebody, our perception of what people think. And I've thought, but I've been really good at incorporating that to my, I'll perceive, they don't even have to be around. They don't even have to be saying anything. And like I'll have done something where I feel like, I didn't do it right or whatever. And so those shame voices will come to me, and I have to go, oh, that's, this voice. And, you don't know, but multiple times I've gone, well, my friend Kristen Snowden would say that's your shame voice. And, honestly, but having the tools to be able to go, I don't have to own that. I can go, that's not the right voice, not my finest moment, but, like, it doesn't make me, a piece of poop and whatever, like that whole shame spiral that you were talking about,
right.
I don't have to completely, go down that rabbit hole. So we have a question. I am a life coach. I coach women through marriage challenges, transitioning through separation and divorce, and how to live after divorce. My nickname is the wife coach. Well, my husband just confessed to cheating again, and now we are separated. Shame tells me I'm no longer qualified to coach women, especially wives. Can you help? That is so hard. So, Kristen, what are your thoughts?
You are a badass for showing up to this group and for
Yes.
asking this question and for putting it out there. And that is probably what makes you such a great life coach, is because you are probably constantly willing to make yourself uncomfortable in the face of adversity and pain and conflict, and keep asking these questions and keep trying to grow from them. Because I think that's what makes people great helpers. At the end of all this hard work that you do in the 12 steps, and you realize how flawed you are and all your character defects and all the crappy things that happened to you. And then you go out and apologize to people for or make amends for the things that you did wrong. And then you try to work to be of service. At the end of it all, they say, and now connect with other people and start sharing your story, because that is what's going to help change lives, is this constant circle and cycle that we have of experiencing pain, conflict, suffering, adversity, trying to work through it and make meaning of it, and then make meaning out of our suffering and pain by sharing our story with other people, learning from it. And I mean, I'd love to hear your comments, Tammy, but we're all humans just trying to make our way through this pain. And as long as we do the really deep, difficult work, the saying that I love is, pain that's not transformed is instead transmitted. And so as long as we work hard to transform our pain and our suffering and our struggles, and then therefore not transmit it onto other people in indirect ways, like these shame shields, for instance, then it can be transformational for other people too.
So my thought is, it's his behavior. It's not your shame. He chose to do that. So he hasn't gotten the right level of help to stop. But I know that it feels like personal, and that, whatever, it's got, I won't say it's got nothing to do with you, because it does, but his behavior is not your fault. It's not your responsibility. He had choices. He chose different things. If it required all of us to be all put together with a bow, to be able to help other people, nobody would be helping anybody else. There's nobody who's got, everything all together. Like Kristen was saying, it's like we take all of our life lessons, and are able, for those of us that are willing, we're able to transition those to life lessons that we can reach out and help people. I had something happen about 3 years ago that was really painful, not with my husband, but it was a big betrayal. And I really struggled, and I had a great therapist and everything. And you know what? The big life lesson for me with that was, I have far more empathy for betrayed partners than I ever did before. It was one of those, it was a very hard lesson, and I'm getting tears. I don't want to repeat it, but honestly, my empathy level for betrayal went way up because of the level of betrayal I experienced. And so I think I'm better suited for what I'm doing now than I ever was before, through my painful process. But I'm glad you're here. If there's resources, that we can share with you, reach out to me, after this group. And, but I'm glad you're here. You have worth. You're doing great work. You're helping other people. So, but, get the support that you need for you too. Don't, like they say, put your life, put your oxygen
mask on first.
Take care of you. So next one. Okay. Oh, second part to my previous question. I think the highest level of shame I'm experiencing is because I divorced and remarried him, and now it's happening again. Shame and embarrassment,
Well, they say there's 4 different really uncomfortable feelings that you kind of need to wade through and figure out and separate. And it's a whole other webinar, which is, Brene Brown says there's 4 really uncomfortable experiences we have that will sometimes confuse and combine with shame, but they're all separate and very different. So one is humiliation, so it's probably this idea that maybe friends and family found out that your husband cheated again and you're separating. And it's this humiliation of, the difference between humiliation and shame is, humiliation is like, I didn't deserve it. So it's this really clear cut, like, I'm more willing to share what happened to me because I didn't deserve what happened to me, this particular situation. Embarrassment's when there's this understanding kind of commonality that, maybe everyone has marital issues. Divorce is pretty common these days. Then there's guilt. There's these pieces. Guilt's kind of the only productive thing, because it's like, where did I fall short? It's this moment that it's like, okay, well, I guess if I have to own the whole picture, maybe I could have done better in this and better in that. And can it be a productive, uncomfortable thing? It's if you steal the candy bar, it's the really uncomfortable feeling that you keep having, or as Tammy just told that story when she said that not kind thing to her husband. Guilt's this like, you need to say something, Tammy, like this goes against your integrity and your values. So fix this, please. And then shame's it's not helpful, because it's this over resounding thing that's not saying you did something bad. It's saying you are bad. Like, you as a human are broken. You're terrible. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. There's nothing that you can do to repair this eternally broken, horrible that you. And we sometimes will experience all four of these uncomfortable emotions: humility, embarrassment, guilt, and shame. And half the work is really unraveling what is going on, what was said and what was experienced that triggered all these things. And really, ultimately, all you need to pull out is like the guilt part and figure out, is there anything that you need to clean up? Keep your side of the street clean. What's your responsibility now that this stuff has all happened? And toss the shame, because it's completely unproductive. It just feeds secrecy, judgment, and all a bunch of bad things: violence, substance abuse, etc. And yeah.
So in Prodependence, we talk about, you love a broken person. You clearly love a broken person. You married him and remarried him, and there's no shame in that. You had your reasons. You see the good parts. The challenges with addicts or people who are unfaithful, it's not all black and white. It's not all, oh, they're all horrible or all good. We're all in the, in that gray area. So, clearly he has some work to do. To me, this feels like I should have known better. I should have, like, why did I do this to myself again? And you didn't, he chose to do that. I think that, he admitted it. So hopefully he's getting the help he needs to be on a different path. And we've got, like I said, lots of resources on seekingintegrity.com, to help support that too. But again, get support for you that isn't shaming, but, can help you identify, what's going to be helpful and healing for you as well. So, okay, next question. I have a hard time dealing with disappointment from other people. And the hardest thing for me to express is my disappointment to that person. Is it shame that forces me to move away? What would be your advice? Disappointment is something we cannot avoid in life.
Right. And the ironic thing, right? Because disappointment is showing a vulnerability, because that's basically saying, like, you've fallen short or I've fallen short. And then there's that, it's so tied into shame, because it's this idea that if I've fallen short from your expectations, is this like the nail in the coffin that makes you not want to be with me anymore? Like, is this where I'm so boring and such a rule follower that I disappoint you that you don't want to hang out with me, to go back to my example. And the ironic thing about vulnerability, there's a myth, that it's weakness, but it's like the first thing that we look for in other people, but it's the last thing that we want to show in ourselves. So that's what's really interesting, is that you probably so painstakingly hesitate with wanting to share when someone's fallen short of your expectations and disappointed you. But when you think, would you want someone to be actually sharing with you if maybe you took a certain tone with them and they kind of created the story that you're mad at them, or that you didn't show up to something and it hurt their feelings, or that they'd expected this from you, but you didn't do it? Most of us would say, yes, we want to know. We want to know when our loved ones or people we care about or people we work with thought we were going to do something and instead we did not. Because most often we want to be able to address it and fix it and repair, or maybe even often give our story. And so they can kind of understand. And as Tammy say, it's not an excuse, it's a reason. Mm-hmm. But it's this, no, I really didn't mean to miss that event, or I really wasn't meaning that in the tone that I took from you. I'd just gotten off a very stressful call with somebody else and I was in a bad place. And I'm sorry if you misinterpreted my words or my actions. Like, we often want the opportunity to explain or better understand how we disappoint others. So try to keep that in mind. You know, it's like, if I want to be loved, or if I want to love other people and have empathy and compassion, they're broken and flawed and not going to be perfect in the way they execute life, and kind of love them in spite of it, I have to be brave enough to show up myself and do that as well, and hope that I put myself around people who can deliver opportunities for growth and feedback on my performance in life, and help me grow to be a better person. So
One of the things I've found for myself too is that if I expect people to read my mind, I'm always disappointed.
right.
So for me, communicating clearly um, alleviates a lot of the disappointment. Um, it was, this is years ago, but my husband said, if you want something, you know, if you're expecting something, you need to tell me. And I was like, well, you should just know, you should just see. And he's like, I don't, you know, and it's not that I'm looking to disappoint you, but, you know, I didn't know you wanted me to take the laundry basket down, you know, what, you know, I mean, it was like those, I was like, you walked right by it, you know, I didn't see it. And like, it was this whole thing. So if I just started saying, would you please, when you go downstairs, take the laundry basket, disappointment was minimized, if not eliminated. So a lot of it, I found that if I clearly communicate what my wants and needs are, then I'm less likely to be disappointed. Not 100%, because we, you know, we're human and we fall short, but you know, it has to be, you know, I'm not perfect, and I really do want people to, you know, to help me grow, but also to identify if, you know, if I've disappointed them, I'd rather have them tell me so we can work through it than, you know, have that resentment turn into, you know, an explosion. So we got another question. My wife of 30 years has labeled me with narcissistic tendencies, and I concur. And I've identified herself as codependent. And I go, ah, okay. She is working diligently on her own self-improvement and wants me to do the same. We are both talking to therapists. However, I feel that everything I say and do is under the microscope, and it feels that there is no way through this. I want us to work with a couples therapist, and she is not willing to discuss us as a couple. We are in sort of a separation now, basically separate bedrooms last 5 months, but still share dinner and family events quite often. I seem somewhat lost. Where do I go from here?
Okay. I actually am, I've exchanged email with this person, so I know
Okay.
a little bit more. So I don't normally do this, but I'm going to speak a little bit more detailed to this person. There's a couple things in this story that concern me, that are coming up for me. Long-term marriage, kind of owning the not so nice labels. And I've also heard like a hyper criticism. So there's a lot of kind of one way criticism of like, you're wrong, you're bad, you did this marriage wrong. I'm going to go work on myself, but I don't want it to involve you. I want to not do it as a couple. I want to kind of do stuff on my own. So there's usually, my experience, and take this with a grain of salt, because I don't know your situation and I could definitely be wrong. But when there's a long-term marriage going on, and there's the person who's kind of been the identified wrongdoer, and there's lots of hypercriticism coming at them, it's often from one or two things. It's often because that person, meaning the person who kind of is thinking about leaving the relationship, is just over it. Maybe they've just felt like they've tried to come to you and talk to you multiple times, and they don't feel like you were open to it, although I'm hearing that you're pretty open to change and all that right now, which is a little contradictory. And so they're just kind of emotionally shut off, mentally shut off, and are kind of forging a path elsewhere. Another reason is because they are otherwise engaged outside the marriage. And I don't know in what way, but it's just often, there's a reason why they don't want to do couples work. There's a reason why they're invested in a lot of kind of one-way criticism about what's going on and kind of your faults. So I understand that you're lost, and I understand things are very confusing to you. I'm not sure if you have all the information about the whole picture of what might be going on for you to get better context of what's going on. So that's really hard. It's really hard when people are kind of stuck in this purgatory where they know something's off and puzzle pieces aren't fitting together. I'm fighting for this marriage. I'm trying to change. I'm asking to do couples therapy, and I'm getting stonewalled across the board. And that, my heart breaks when that happens. I'm sorry. But I'm just going to ask you to put yourself around maybe go to some support groups and get yourself around some other people who are in that situation and keep talking about it, because I think the puzzle pieces are going to start coming together, because it sounds like your partner is not the person that's going to help you get these puzzle pieces put together. It sounds like you're kind of on your own to be doing your work. Go ahead, Tammy. What do you have to add?
Well, no, just the narcissistic tendencies. I think of addiction, and obviously addiction is very narcissistic. So if there is some compulsive behavior addiction, please, dig into the resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com so that you can get the support. We've got a men's work group starting August 2nd again that will go through the Sex Addiction 101 workbook in a work group. It's a lot for me to say, but it's just a structured time to do that. But there's a lot of support. There's podcasts, and Kristen has done one with Dr. Rob. There's just a lot of information, and I think the more you glean, some of those puzzle pieces may get put on the table for you to at least be able to identify. So
right, and that's really well said too, because that's what I was kind of saying in that original model, is that maybe she's asked in lots of different ways for you to get clarity or clearing things. And it's like in her, I don't know, because sometimes with those codependency labels, they think they need to kind of set these really concrete black and white boundaries and kind of say, I go my way, you go your way, you do your path of cleaning up and stuff like that. There's too many unknowns in this story. So I'm just going to encourage you to keep talking about it and see if you can start getting clarity from other people, hearing other people's stories, and finding out what's going on, because there's too many uncertainties here.
So the next one is, what would you suggest when we see that our husband, porn addict, is in shame, but he says he does not have shame anymore? How does he get rid of it all? Like, that's fantastic. I haven't figured that out. She says snarkily. Rob always calls me out when I start being snarky for what he's done. He's healed his shame. My CSAT says his intimacy disorder is slowing down his recovery and that he cannot identify his own feelings, including shame. Is there something I can do in those moments, or do I just let him think he is not in shame and keep myself safe through my boundaries? That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, you can't heal shame. It can't wipe away. As long as you have a desire to want to connect with other people, you're going to have a deep intrinsic fear of what if I'm not enough for it. So I'm still going to experience anxiety, and especially if I have addiction and very shameful history of behaviors, you're going to be even more shame inclined. So what he might just mean is, I'm better at disconnecting and not owning my shame. I'm better at just ignoring it because I know it's there now. And I don't mean to be snarky with that. It's just, I hear that I've healed my shame all the time, yet it's still so
really
and everything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. No, I think we like to think that we can conquer it, but it's just not conquerable. Slowing down his recovery, identifies. Look, this shame stuff, like I said, if I have to say, I think this is my most difficult work as a therapist is helping people. That's why I am a big fan of Brene Brown's work, because I think she makes it as tangible and understandable and approachable as any other topic. So I would encourage you and him to maybe explore some of the topics around shame, or even Brene Brown stuff, or even the stuff we talk about. So when you see the podcasts or articles on sexandrelationshiphealing.com around shame, toxic shame, all that kind of stuff, listen to it, hear it. You got to hear it kind of over and over and over and over again. So it causes you to kind of tap into it, the way that shame shows up in your life. Because no, you can't heal it. It doesn't go away. And to be honest, if you're not doing your recovery fully, then there's still these little voices in your head that say, yeah, you're still a pretty crappy person. Like, your wife caught you doing all these things. You've deeply hurt her and scarred her. She's asked you to do this very specific recovery plan. People have told you how to do this very specific recovery plan to get through it, and you don't really want to. It feels really yucky. There's too much vulnerability involved with it. So I'm just not going to. So
Troy Love does, he does a webinar on here too, and he does Finding Peace, but those shame voices, the judge, the politician, I mean, there's all of these things, that we have. And I'm kind of wondering if I would invite him to join the drop-in group on Friday mornings with Troy Love, because they talk about those things. And it may be one of the avenues for him to kind of touch base with what might possibly be shame. I think, Kristen, when you started talking, and you said, like 6 months into therapy, people all of a sudden go, oh, I think I might have shame. So I can see, I can see that there's a disconnect, for what might be shame as to how it feels or shows up. So exploring that with all the resources you shared, makes a lot of sense too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the more you can hear. When I was exploring this topic of shame and struggling with it, like, I knew I had it, but I couldn't figure it out, and it was driving me nuts. I just poured it in my head at all times. Listened to every Brene Brown podcast, read every book around it, because the more I heard examples of it and understood the context of it in other people's lives, it started becoming more obvious about how it shows up in mine. That's the way it worked for me. And I think that's also why 12 steps is so powerful.
Yeah. And when you said, how it shows up for you is going to be different than how it shows up for me. So we can't just go, oh, I don't have it because I don't have that. We really do need to explore all the different ways it shows up. I mean, like I said, I love my dad, but he was hard on us, and so mine shows up as my dad's voice. I mean, I'll go, oh, that's your dad's voice, so I really. So next question. You mentioned addiction is narcissistic by nature. My husband, during his confession, stated he is a sex addict. Does that mean he's a narcissist?
Right. So let me clarify that. So I say often my clients will come into my treatment center, and when they're giving the case conference, they'll say oh, pretty narcissistic, or for sometimes when it's women, they'll say pretty borderline, because that's just what they tend to do, is men are often narcissists and women are borderline. I personally struggle with those labels. So similar to the way Tammy doesn't like codependence, because I find that addiction, when you're active in your addiction, you're going to show narcissistic tendencies. So I know another person just mentioned this narcissistic tendencies. I mean, what that's basically, when I hear that, what I hear is you give off the appearance of being selfish, not accepting influence, kind of thinking grandiosity, so thinking kind of irrationally that life is just about you, or that you're correct, or that you're doing just fine, or doing even better than just fine. And those are all defense mechanisms that are similar to addiction, right? Give off the appearance of. But we know that the truth is that they're numbing their pain, and they're acting out because their egos are so fragile that they can't handle the reality or the shame involved. And so they'll be that type of person that I gave that example, that kind of puffs up their chest and pretends to be better than they are, greater, smarter, better, more selfish. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you think. Fine, leave the marriage. But really it's because they're so fragile and so hurt. So it's I'll reject you before you can reject me. I don't accept influence from other people because I never want to have that kind of intimate connection and vulnerability where we show each other, our true selves, and I accept influence from you and you accept influence from me. And that's I don't want that kind of relationship. So that's why, so he says during the confession, he states he's a sex addict. Does that mean he's a narcissist? Sure, I guess. I mean, if you really want to label, but it's sex addict, narcissist, those are just labels. I care more about the symptomology. I care more about, you know, is he unable to take accountability for anything? Is he always have to be right? Does he appear to not care that things harm you? It's just kind of part of the package. And it's just tools to help you. The way you deal with it is you just kind of slowly have to help them see how much their behavior does impact you, how much they do hurt other people, that they are loved, and that they should invest in the people who love them and lean into us and accept influence, accept help, accept that they don't know the answers to everything, that kind of stuff.
Dr. Rob has talked about this a few times on his webinar, and he's talked about in his career, and he's worked with lots of people, and he's only had a handful of people who were true narcissistic personality disorder. And that requires, you know, the psychological testing so that, you know, you want the right person making that diagnosis, and then they won't ever care. An addict in active addiction is so defending their ability to continue to act out that they act very narcissistic. It's all about me, and I'm going to blame shift, and you know, it's because you, like Kristen was like, I'm going to hurt you first, so I'm going to push you away, all of those things, because then I get to still do my acting out, whatever form that takes. And so it is very narcissistic. We're very self-centered and all about us, you know, when we're in our active addiction. But if we're not narcissistic personality disorders, we can learn. I mean, that's what we teach in our, you know, treatment program. We learn to connect with other people. We learn to have empathy. You know, for those that are in a relationship, you know, the clinicians are talking to them about, you know, how this has hurt, you know, their behavior hurts them, but also hurts their loved ones. So, and, you know, and you know, the guys will cry, you know, and that means that they can connect. They can learn to have that level of empathy, you know, for other people. So, you know, like Kristen said, I say it's an excuse, or it's a reason, not an excuse. But, you know, if now he owns he's a sex addict. Great. That's the first step. And then, you know, it's working on, you know, getting the tools so that he doesn't have to continue on that path. So he'll always be an addict, but he doesn't have to be an active addict. So we are out of time. Thank you all for your questions today. Thank you, Kristen, as always. It's always a delight to be on a webinar with you. Reach out, seekingintegrity.com. There's lots of resources. We're adding more online work groups, including some work for couples. Lots of meetings and drop-in groups on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. On KristenSnowden.com, you can find Kristen. So we'll see you next month.
Yes, next month. Thank you everyone for joining. I appreciate seeing the numbers and people joining and coming in, asking questions. So thank you for your time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.